May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be acceptable and pleasing in thy sight, O God. Amen. Please be seated. Well, good morning. This is an amazing day. It's still technologically perplexing and confusing, but we're figuring it out. I don't at all want to imply that our pandemic is over. We still should be cautious. We still should follow what the leaders say. And this is a unique day. This is a great moment. I looked it up, and the last time we had people physically present in church was March 8th, 2020. And then we had 64 Sundays of myself and Ben in a sanctuary, hoping that someone out there was listening and paying attention. And now 65th Sunday, we have a limited group here in weird circumstances in the fellowship hall. But thank you all for your patience and grace and your willingness to be here. And may we continue to extend patience and grace to everyone who has different levels of comfort and are not physically gathered, but are still over Zoom and joining us that way. We're all trying to figure this out on our own. But of these 64 Sundays that we were not physically present, there was a pandemic raging, and it killed hundreds of thousands and millions of people. And I just want to take a moment to honor those people, but also to notice that no one in our church died of COVID-19. And I believe only 2 or 3 people ever tested positive. Yes, please. Sorry, I'm not used to that. It's been 65 Sundays since I had to pause for applause, so forgive me, but yes. And I just especially want to highlight that this disease, especially at its beginning stages, was really scary. And it was really scary for people who had multiple factors that would compromise their immune system. And so our church is comprised of a lot of older people and a lot of older Black Americans. And because of structural historical racism in America, being Black was another factor of having not because it's the fault of Black Americans, but it's because it's the fault of racism in America, right? And so I just want to recognize and honor our elders that survived this dangerous pandemic. People like Mr. Floyd O'Connor. Applause, great. I gotta get used to this. This is really nice. But people like Mr. Floyd O'Connor is 100 years old. And he, like most of us, was wise and safe and took precautions, and he's still with us today. People like Miss Irene Hunter and everyone else in their 90s who maybe didn't want me to name them. Or other church members in their 80s. I have to be careful what I look at. I don't want people to think I'm calling them out. But if you think of all our church members in their 80s and 90s, and Mr. O'Connor, who's 100, it's a blessing from God that they're still with us. And I'm just so thankful to God and to everyone for being wise and safe. Our church is a better place because we have our elders with us. We are blessed to have them with us, not just because they're our elders, but because of the wisdom and all that they each bring with their own personalities. And I hope they're here for years and years to come. So thank you and blessings. So welcome back. This week is Pride Month, and we have some LGBTQ members. So I want to honor people with Pride Month. And last year would have been the 50th anniversary of the first Pride Parade in San Francisco. And because of the pandemic, it was canceled. But because it's Pride Month, you're hearing stories of LGBTQ people. And I recently heard stories from the AIDS epidemic in the 80s. And I heard someone criticizing I think it's a play called Angels in America, because it centers around a gay couple where one of the guys gets AIDS and his partner decides to leave him. And the criticism I heard from people who lived through that era was that almost never happened. What more often happened was if someone said they had AIDS, it was one of the first times that their family knew that they were gay, and their families were the ones that abandoned them, not their partners and not the members of their LGBTQ community. And I bring this up because we had this great passage where Jesus today says, "Who are my mother and my brothers and my sisters?" And sometimes we have biological family members that for whatever reason try to keep us from achieving and accomplishing our goals. So Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of God, needs to be Jesus, right? And instead, his mother and his brothers are like, oh, wow, he's causing a commotion. He's doing crazy talk. Let's go get him and put him in line. And Jesus, the very Son of God, has to kind of tell his biological family, no. Sorry, I have to do what I came here to do. And so who are my mother and my brothers and my sisters? It's the people who I'm choosing to be in my community with, because they're recognizing who I am and they're helping me achieve my goals. And one thing I think that's been good that's come out of this pandemic is, as a lot of us have sat alone, we've had to intentionally choose who is in our community. And technology is advanced enough where we were able to do that. So I've heard stories of people connecting with their high school or college classmates who they haven't talked to in 30, 40 years. And now they're meeting over Zoom either weekly or monthly. Or people who have moved away from different people, and now because of Zoom and conference calls and all that, they're able to reconnect on a monthly basis. And it's like, oh wow, even though we're all physically living in different places, we can still intentionally connect, and we can still choose our community. I know for me, I've been having daily phone calls with different friends, and one of my friends, when we started this during the pandemic, he lived in Switzerland, and then he moved to Amsterdam. It's like, but we're still community. And it's still like, that's my brother, that's my sister, that's my community, even as we're physically distanced. And I find this to be such a beautiful opportunity. There's a lot that's been horrible about the pandemic, but there's also some beauty that we can see within that. And we get to kind of be more intentional about choosing our community now. And technology allows us to connect now. And so, who do you want to be? What is your mission? And I hope and pray that everyone's biological family loves, honors, and supports that. And sometimes modern life, we move around a lot. It's not as common for people to be born, raised, and grow old in the same town. I know it does happen, and it's beautiful, but a lot of us also move around and live all kinds of different places. And wherever you go, you're forming new community. And one of my goals for our church is that we become that brothers and sisters and mothers to one another, as our goal is to faithfully worship God. And then, as we say at the end of the service, go in peace to love and serve the Lord. So our goal is to gather and faithfully worship God, and then be empowered to go and love and serve the Lord, which also means loving one another and loving the people in our lives. And if you've ever tried to love someone and love them deeply, you know it's really hard. And so we need to keep gathering together, either physically or over Zoom or however we can do it. We need to continue to gather, because our mission as Christians, as people who cling to Jesus, is to go into the world and to love and serve the Lord, and to see Jesus in everyone we encounter. And that's really hard. And so as we begin to regather, today we can't do fellowship after the service physically inside. So Marilyn has asked people if they want to gather in the garden. We can socially distance, hang out there, or outside on the sidewalk. We say outside because the data shows outdoors is 20 times safer than indoors. So please, after the service, go. But as we begin to regather and have fellowship hour together physically, and still over Zoom as well, how do we intentionally want to be? Sometimes in this pandemic, for a lot of us, it's been really hard. So as we regather, are we going to be vulnerable enough to say that? If someone's like, hey, how are you doing? How was your week? Are you going to be willing to say, this week was terrible? And it's okay, we don't have to, but I just want to be able to be open and honest and say this week was awful. It wasn't for me, but I've had weeks where that was true. In the 64 Sundays there are weeks where I was like, this week is terrible. And I would love for us to be a community where we can share that, we can bring that, because if we really are going to be mothers and brothers and sisters to one another, that's what we desperately, desperately need. And so as we gather in all this, I just want to ask, how do we intentionally want to be in community? Will we have the courage to show up faithfully and honestly and with a little bit of vulnerability and share life together genuinely? One thing I heard a priest say is that one of the benefits of the pandemic is after church, it's a lot harder for the church members to gossip about each other. And so as we regather, do we want to be a people genuinely sharing life together, all of our ups and downs? Or do we want to be a people that gossips, a people that kind of sniffs and all of that? And we get to choose. That's the beauty. We do have agency, and we get to choose. So thank you all for being here over Zoom, and thank you all for having the courage to be here in person. Amen.